Hey Benji, how's it going?
Hey, yeah, it's going good, thanks. How's it going with
All
you?
right, excellent. Oh, pretty good. Just getting ready for GraphQL Conf. Excited for that next week. Coming
Yeah,
up fast.
it really is. Yeah, I'm still writing my talk, but
Oh yeah,
it'll be
same.
all right on the night, as they say.
Yep, yep. Are you on day one or day two?
Day two.
Day two. Okay, nice. Yeah, same. Oh, great. Yeah, coming up fast. Looking forward to it for sure.
Absolutely. I think it's just the two of us tonight in the agenda. Um,
Aha.
there's no specific topics at the moment. I'm mostly waiting on feedback. So, oh, hello, Mark has
Yeah,
arrived.
cool. Nice. All right.
Just give Mark a moment to dial in. Um, Yeah, okay, so let's kick this thing off. Hello everyone. Oh, I should turn my AV on, I realize. Mhm. Hey.
Nice. There you
Hello
go.
everyone. Welcome to the May edition of the Golden Path Working Group. By being here, we have all agreed to the specification membership agreement, the participation guidelines, the contribution guide, the code of conduct, and we are also aware that the videos are recorded, they're published to YouTube, and that we use large language model and AI summary tools with them, especially for taking notes. Um, We'll start with a very quick introduction of attendees in the order of appearance connection today. So starting with myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Benji.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Gerald.
Hello, I'm Mark.
Thanks, folks. And I suspect we won't need to take notes today, so we'll skip over that. There is nothing in particular on the agenda, so this can just be a free and open conversation. What do you want to talk about?
Good question.
I had like one item which is very, very, very loosely tangential related, mostly was a question for Gerald because it's something that Martin and I had talked about, which is mocking. Um,
Yeah.
mock spec, but this is something that I'll put at the end, and if there are any other agenda items, because it's sort of like the most tangentially related to this working group.
Okay, folks. Well, we've reached the end of the agenda. So if there's any further items you'd like to discuss.
All right, you're up, Mark.
All right. So this is our new fancy GAPS website, and this is GAP 10,
Ooh.
which is the mock spec. So I don't know if you've seen this or like how much Martin spoke to you about it. We chatted a little bit, and he said he's going to speak to you. Um, but this is something that I've been working on with Michael from Airbnb, who published um, like a blog post about how they do mocking in GraphQL on clients. Not I'm not talking about unit test mocking and like mock provider. I'm talking about
Yeah.
uh, dev working in the browser, and I want to get ahead of the schema authors, and I don't want to wait for a backend dev. I just want to use. I want to do like the dream query thing, and I want to pretend that these fields exist. Like, how do I do that? And we have at Yelp that same problem, and lots of people, lots of companies like Meta are kind of also looking into this. Someone from Expedia just published the way that they do mocking, which has like a service. So there's like a lot of people all tackling this problem kind of at the same time. And I think with the advent of LLMs can generate these mocks for you, that's kind of like really turbocharged it and made it a good time to be thinking about this. And so at mock is my attempt at trying to standardize this. That's kind of like the whole point of this, is that we're all solving, like we all have the same problems. We're all on similar stacks. And like even as like Apollo versus like other clients, doesn't really matter. Like the
Yeah.
approach, same, we're using
Yeah.
GraphQL. And so there's kind of really some yeah, like it just kind of makes sense that we would all benefit from a similar shared solution. And the implementation of like exactly how you generate types might change client to client, because like some clients are type aware, some clients are not type aware, but the interface,
Right.
the like developer experience, I think could be shared. So that's kind of like the pitch here is this is something that we know already works for like Airbnb, basically. And it's, I think we're going to do the same thing at Yelp through the Mock spec. And I have this already implemented as well through this demo website.
Funny.
The reference implementation of this mock spec is done so purely as an Apollo link for now. Although I do expect that other implementations could do so, like maybe Relay does something similar. I don't know. But yeah, so
Yeah.
on my GitHub, there's a Apollo link mock spec, whatever, that implements the specification, and this is the website to do it. So yeah. Yeah, and I was chatting with Martin about this, and he was saying that you guys were thinking of something similar. So yeah, just kind of wanted to chat to you about that maybe.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, he did mention it. We didn't really talk in depth about specifics. He just mentioned, we talked more about the tooling around it, because he's been thinking about it a lot in Apollo Kotlin, which like I guess it's a big ask right now on kind of the mobile side to have some solution there. He might have mentioned the mock directive. I'm trying to remember at this point now if he did, but I know at least on the actual like tooling end of it, that we had a small discussion around that. I think, obviously, that it would be nice if we could have some tool that you could use regardless of, technology, but I don't think that's unfortunately it's the right word. Not possible, but just I don't think it would be received well, like asking Kotlin developers to use a JavaScript tool or vice versa or whatever else. So my guess is there's probably like this looks like a good solution towards something where tools could build around this rather than just like a shared server, mock server, something that you could use between all sorts of clients. But yeah, was that you're muted?
I was going to say, like, to be clear, there is no mock server implied here. There's no JavaScript implied here,
right?
Which is unlike other solutions in the past. So, like, I think the Expedia folks do have a server that sits in between the client and the real server. GraphQL Faker as well, kind of was a server that sits in between. This spec does not have any in between server. There is you must use JavaScript. It's just like basically it's just specifying there is a directive. You can use like the inline label field, or you can like generate like JSON files, and like it's up to you how you implement that.
But so it's less about specific tooling and more about standardizing a way for tooling to be built around it. Is that a good way to summarize this? Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because we've done the same thing in the past. We have a GraphQL testing library that we put out. Granted, we haven't put too much love into it recently, but that one uses mock service workers to basically intercept the request and respond with, some kind of canned response. But it operates at the operation level, at the request level, rather than field level like this is. But I mean, this looks nice for sure. I'm guessing this would allow a mix of real server data plus some kind of which is good. Yeah,
that's already implemented. If you click in the like select demo, there's like field new which merge like the population field does not exist.
Yeah.
In the real Trevor Blades server, that's like entirely and that's merged in like as the client middleware.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, neat.
The only thing that I didn't quite yet figure out, which I want to figure out, because it was getting like too hairy with like edge cases and like, but what about this and what about that, would be like mocking like per fragment. And like I have a long like discourse in the README file as to like why that's problematic, and you have like fragments that can be used in weird ways, and that one. But I think like the spec as it exists for now, I think like covers most use cases, I think.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, I like this idea a lot. I've come to really not like, operation, or at least like per request based mocking in any form, just because it's fragile. But yeah.
Yeah, and then also you have like on the relay side people who have like one single, like they're not thinking in terms of queries, they're thinking in terms of like fragments, right? And so,
right. Yeah.
It makes a lot more sense to do this.
Yeah.
Field based approach. And I kind of like published a story, like a blog post about this like ages ago, like the dream query, like the pattern that we Yelp is a designer will give you a mock, like go and implement this page. And often this is the case with when we were doing like a lot of migrations from like pre-React to React, people would like paste in the query and then have like certain fields just commented out. And so this kind of like allows a V2 version of that workflow, I guess, which is really nice.
That makes a lot of sense. I know our solutions team, I think, does that a lot with clients or prospective clients. They talk a lot about the dream query, as a place to start. If you could design this how you want to, what would it look like, and kind of moving from there. So that resonates a lot. I've seen that work well as an approach.
Cool. Well, anyway, look, I'm obviously more than happy to talk about this, and if this if this or like something like this works for you, then great. If you're like, we'd want it to look different, maybe, and if you're open to it, like maybe it could be changed in like a future version or something. I don't know, like whatever you end up doing, even if it's like something completely different, like frankly, we'll probably just end up using that anyway. This already works and it's kind of like proven out. Like my goal is to like prove this out, that this works. Like Airbnb have already done that as well, and then and have a conversation with you. But I don't know.
Yeah, it makes sense. It would be nice to have something kind of more built in to clients, as more of a standard too. But
I mean, like my dream for this, and sorry, this is getting like very vendor specific here, but my dream to be able to just install Apollo link mock or whatever, and then that's in the same way you kind of already package things up as separate links and package, distribute those as like first packages.
I would agree. For stuff like this, how do we generally, obviously I'm not part of the GraphQL working group. I haven't been too much, but like, how do we view these types of, I'll call this a community extension for lack of a better term? Because I don't know if you're proposing to put this in GraphQL specification itself, but like let's just pretend not, what is this sort of process for that? Or
yeah, that's a very timely question. So Benji and I have been working on GAPS. So this GAPS website that you're looking at stands for GraphQL Auxiliary Proposals. This is like brand new, and we're going to be talking about it at Conf. Things like the connections specification and cost directive, these are all like community specs that don't belong in the core GraphQL spec, that are applicable to like a wide portion of servers out there, and so they're just published as random community specs. And so GAPS is the home for all these community specs. And if you have something that doesn't quite fit in the core spec but is written in SpecMD and could be applied to a lot of servers, like an application land concern, then we want you to submit it as a GAP, as a GraphQL.
Yeah, makes sense.
Let me see if I can bring up the repo for that real quick.
It's a good name.
It's all credit to Benji.
Nice.
I think really like the pun. I love Benji's approach of pun driven development. It's great.
Yeah, I would agree. It's memorable for
sure.
Are
there are gaps in the spec, so you can write a GraphQL auxiliary proposal.
Yeah, I did start with the abbreviation, and yeah, it was a backronym essentially. Yeah.
I hate
nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I will have to look at this more closely. Like, I like the idea a lot. It would be nice to have, especially more of the client tools that can adopt something similar. That way, if you move between them, hopefully all of them would provide some kind of first class solution for this type of thing.
But and like one thing I wanted to like kind of understand more is it's not going to work for mobile, and like why that's the case. Because the same concerns that you would have on mobile as, well, we need to generate types, you have on the web platform as well, because let's face it, like most people are using TypeScript. I know that Apollo Client is supposed to work without TypeScript, but if you don't need types, if you don't need TypeScript, you don't need the schema, so it just works anyway. And you need types, you need TypeScript, you already have the schema, so it's going to work anyway. So there is an implied bit of, and this is in the spec as like figure this out yourself, but there is an implied bit of if you do need to generate types, then you would do so. Like if you're like defining a whole subtree that doesn't exist yet in the real server, like the LLM would say this is the foobar type, and like the foobar type doesn't exist yet. So like that you would use that as underscore type name. Like that's the name of the type that you're going to generate. But yeah, I think the story is there, if somewhat ill defined, but I hope it could work.
It makes sense. Granted, the way I would look at this, is like we have obviously like local resolvers and Apollo Client, right? This feels very much like that. It's the client directive with, but specifically for CAN data, client directive it essentially works the same, right? You're providing some kind of client-driven field data with something. The way we approach TypeScript with that, it just types, because the runtime part, that part's easy, I think, in a language like TypeScript, JavaScript, where like Apollo Client doesn't really care about those types; it just cares about the shapes against the query. But we use just schema extensions, so you can create a .graphql file with extend type, and then add fields as you need to, and that drives type definitions for like those client fields that you want to do. Maybe a similar type of thing. I don't know if, granted, I don't know the Apollo Kotlin, the Apollo iOS, those type of mobile environments as well in terms of exactly how they do type generation for that kind of stuff, or if they have support for a similar type of like client directive. But
okay, so
that's kind of how I think about it. So it's possible. For sure.
So that would be the implementation. So that would be like the implementation for Target for web then, since web already has a defined way of doing that. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's why it's written like an implementation defined bit in the spec.
Yeah, makes sense.
Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, at least on the website, it seems very doable. Like I said, to me, it's basically at client sort of rebranded, but specifically targeted towards mock data.
Yeah, I mean it's already done. Like I have like that link.
Yeah, which is great.
I will say, like, I completely vibe coded that. Like I spent a long time on the spec. Like the spec was human written and like has algorithms in it. It's like very exhaustively handcrafted. Which I don't know if you're like into the whole spec driven development workflow discussion recently, but like as I expected, the actual implementation of this just is derived entirely from that specification. I would be happy to just like give that code over to you if you wanted, but I don't know, you may want to do something different there. But anyway, point is like the website kind of is like the demo, like, hey, this all works. It's all works as a link. So yeah, whatever.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, let me talk to Martin and just it would be nice if we could get this in both. just as a way to kind of maybe help push this forward too, as a thing. Because I definitely this seems useful. There's been plenty of times where I needed something like this, and I reach for client fields for it at times, but I like this better.
Cool. Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm happy to keep chatting about it if you want to, do some on the.
Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah, if you have the implementation somewhere, I'd love to see that too. Be happy to take a look.
Yeah, if you the top, if you go back to that mock spec demo website, there's the source at the top.
Oh, there we go. Okay, great. Yep.
Which is the website.
Cool.
But then the actual that's just the website, which is like the not interesting bits. The plugin is I guess I should add a link for this. This repo specifically is the vibe coded implementation of the spec. So honestly, like, you may read the source code to this and be like, it's absolutely horrible.
No, it's fine.
You may be right. I was not precious about this at all. I was very precious about the spec, that this kind of like proves it can work.
Yeah. For prototyping, I who cares? It's worth it to prove out an idea.
There's like a kind of hairy bit that you may object to, which is we're kind of abusing the cache behavior, in that the cache will accept in fields that like don't really exist, and that's kind of how this works.
Right. Yeah. It's just, we do the same with client fields. I don't see it as an abuse at all. I think that's totally fine. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The GraphQL document is the ultimate source of truth for what gets written and read out of it. So,
right.
And however you augment that, then that's fine. Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, and like one more wrinkle, and Benji's ears are going to pick up on this, is how this interacts with persisted documents, like trusted documents, and you would maybe need to filter that out, which again is a bit in the spec, which is like a do-it-yourself. Like, you can just do that, and we would provide like a standard. You already do this with like __ type name, right?
Yeah. The way we've done it for all the existing stuff, because obviously people use client fields today, and that never sees the server. Is we are like the persisted query generation tool, the thing that creates the manifest, actually runs the query through like a mock Apollo client instance, just so that it runs all the internal transforms. Yeah. So like it'd probably be something similar. I don't know how other clients do it, if you're talking about bringing this to say Oracle or whatever else. But yeah, at least that there's path forward for that. I'm not super worried about that. At least
it's a pretty trivial AST transform, as long as the shards match up.
Right.
But,
right. Yeah.
Just something to call out, that the mock directive does not exist on the server. So
yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So you want to make sure you hash the mock fields removed, not the original query.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Benji, for completely railroading the meeting. That's pretty much all I had on this topic.
Not at all. That was a great discussion. I spent some of it scanning over the spec as it stands as well. I like it. It's well written. I have sent you a stream of consciousness of notes through your DMs, so enjoy that.
Thank you.
I won't file them directly on the pull request itself, because if I'm posting publicly, I'll actually go through and validate what I'm saying is sensible. Whereas this is like as I read through the spec. Yeah, cool. So I guess the one of the interesting bits for the golden path on this would be how this would interact, as you say, with trusted documents. And I think that actually having rules on the transforms to use for trusted documents makes sense. Trusted documents is actually one of the things I really, really want to improve across the ecosystem. And I think we've done a reasonably good job over the last couple of years of basically telling people you should be using them. But what we haven't done a good job of is making it easy. Like every vendor has their own solutions to this. There's different ways of like generating them from your applications. It matters which client you're using. It matters how you've configured your client. And then when you mix in things like this directive as well, it's an issue. So just to pivot back to Golden Path, one of the things that I would like to do as part of this is to come up with some kind of standardized interchange format, interchange mechanism that allows us to communicate to the client, here's how you send me your trusted documents. And this is, if you're interested to watch the recording, this was something that I discussed a little bit at one of the previous GraphQL over HTTP working groups. But specifically, this ties into the work that I'm doing with service capabilities. So service capabilities, the idea is that you point your client at a schema endpoint at like, example.com/GraphQL, and you say like, this is my GraphQL endpoint, do all the things. And it should be able to discover from that, oh, you're using, we support this type of error handling. Yes, you can use fragment arguments. Yes, we're using trusted documents, and you can go to, you can upload your trusted documents to like this endpoint using this mechanism, maybe using this identified secret that you've got in some like shared key store somewhere or whatever. And like, I don't imagine that there will be only one way of doing that. In fact, I can tell you there are multiple, right? So some people for trusted documents, especially if they're working in a monorepo, literally just commit them to Git. Like you just build your mobile apps, you build your website, you write the documents out to files in Git, and then when you publish your server next, it's already got access to all the queries because they're just files in Git. But that obviously doesn't scale too high. Go on, Mark.
Right.
Yeah, and this kind of like relates again to a discussion I was having with Martin, which is in GraphQL JS having an API for that, for swapping out an incoming document with a trusted document ID, and having like a sort of a neutral way to do that would be helpful. I don't know if that's something that's already been talked about in the GraphQL JS repo or not. We do this at Yelp. So yeah, like we have a registry of document IDs and our own custom hashing strategy and whatever. So yeah, I'm all for standardizing this.
Yeah. So I'd love to absolutely like learn how people are doing this and then like pull it all back together again. One of the things is obviously there's different mechanisms. There's write it to a file, there's upload it to an HTTP endpoint, there is, whatever else you want to do. There's also like, potentially ways of authenticating it. There's also different methods of like, so trusted documents as it's currently like described on Benji.dev is essentially like persisted documents that you trust, right? And persisted documents is its own like spec. But it was pointed out that actually trusted documents doesn't have to be persisted documents. It doesn't have to be send your query somewhere else, get a hash or an identifier back, and then in future only use the identifier. It can be the fact that you just send a document that is signed, for example, and that way there doesn't need to be like any pre-agreement with the server. The server just receives the document and the signature, and it goes, does it make sense that does this signature pass? Is it cryptographically valid for this document? And if so, yeah, I'll run it. So there are other mechanisms as well. So like identifying which of the methods you're using. We're using SHA-256 hashes. You can do it client side, or no, we need you to upload it in advance at this endpoint and we will give you an identifier, or no, you just use signatures. So my aim is that through the capabilities system, we can indicate this stuff. We can like come up with a few like 3-4 standard ways of doing it depending on what your use cases are, and then we can bake this into like clients and servers so that everyone understands it. And so many of the platforms out there that exist, like the one you were just describing. Like there are places where you send the trusted documents, right, and then they get stored into a registry. Yeah. Sometimes you do that on a per document basis. Sometimes you do it in bulk. But we want to make that so that it's kind of standardized. One of the slight issues of this, and this comes again to the HTTP spec side of things, is if you turn off introspection, you can't ask about service capabilities. So we're talking about potentially making service capabilities its own like HTTP endpoint. So that's another thing. But this is also something that we can use as a basis of a number of other things on the Golden Path as well. So since this is all stuff that I'm sort of thinking about anyway, I thought it would be wise to raise it in case it ties into any of the things that you're working on or that you think are important. This could, for example, tie into like depth limits, right? It could be that actually through the service capabilities, the service indicates our depth limits are, 1577 or whatever we want to say for the different types. And that way, rather, because at the moment the aim was for the Golden Path to dictate, like, here's the numbers you should use, but you can change them. But if you use them or if you change them, at the moment, there's no way for the client to know that. And the only way to find out is when you like literally issue a query to the server and it gets rejected. So I think enabling this like more flexibility through the capabilities system might be the right way to do it. What do you think?
I'm having trouble correlating, sorry, like where we started with this conversation, which is the mock spec, and then getting that
interacting with persistent, with trusted documents.
Yeah, sorry. It not particularly related to the mock spec, other than that the mock spec has an interaction with trusted documents. So yeah, really, I've just pivoted it onto talking about trusted documents and broader Golden Path stuff.
Yeah, in terms of like things that you would want to change, like having something in GraphQL JS, like some interface to you bring your own registry, and I'm thinking back to like Express JS when it gives you a function to store like the session token somewhere. It just doesn't care about like what type of database you have, just like here's a function, like implement the function. So like something similar to that in GraphQL JS for returning for swapping back a document ID, for exchanging a document ID for a document, or to what you're saying earlier, exchanging a document and the document hash or HMAC, whatever, for a document. And so standardizing that there in GraphQL seems like a good idea. And then pairing that with standardization elsewhere to, okay, so you want standardization to actually take in .graphql file or files and turn that into a hash. And then like, how do you do that? Okay, this is all making sense now, yeah. What are the things that you would have to do? Maybe you have to remove @mock if that is a thing that you use. How do you express and define that? Like what's the config? Is that config service capabilities maybe? Although how do you express in service capabilities that the client might? Because I guess like, I mean, this is a good example actually where maybe it wouldn't help because @mock is purely a client side only thing. The server,
right? Yeah, so I never see that.
And will never care that the client is doing @mock, right?
Yeah, so one of the things that the Golden Path is trying to do, right, is to cover like all the bases. So cover the client and the server, but also the tooling. So in this case, the server wouldn't care about mock. So it wouldn't be particularly relevant to say this through service capabilities that like mock should be stripped. But it would be relevant to, for example, GraphQL code generator. And GraphQL code generator might not know about this
Yeah.
unless we have some standard um, pattern. It does make me wonder whether at mock should whether we should use we are adding directives on directives now. So I'm wondering whether there should be a what's the one that Apollo uses? Is it at local or at client?
At client. Yeah.
At client. So I wonder if there should be like an at local or something like that directive that you can apply. So you can apply at local to at client, you can apply at local to at mock, and any other like client side only things can be marked with this particular directive. And then GraphQL Code Gen doesn't need to know about mock. It doesn't need to know about at client. It just needs to say, hey, these are local directives. These are local directives. So anything marked with this should be removed. And what that would also mean for your spec as it stands, Mark, is that that concept of removing stuff that is client local before you send it to the server can become itself a gap. It can be a standard gap that is like, here is how we remove client local directives. Fields marked with that.
We've previously talked about in the main working group this idea of like what was it, like source schemas versus execution schemas and the difference between the two, and you might have to compile into an execute like a schema that if you pass it through parse and print, do an introspection into GraphQL.js and then prints back out again, gives you the same thing, right? And the difference between those two types of schemas, and being able to have like a compile only directive which can mark certain other directives. I think actually, yeah, I think we've had this exact conversation before, because like someone came into the working group with the idea of a directive to add fields to interface types instead of like having to duplicate them out. And so we kind of suggested that like you could write that directive, but then like that directive only exists in your source schemas and gets compiled out. And so you might want to tag the like add interface fields directive, and like so you'd at interface fields at compile only or something. And so like it sounds like almost exactly the same conversation. So your proposal is at local at mock or something like that.
So I think it's slightly different from that one. So the one that you proposed before, the one that you mentioned,
because
is like a well, that one's like a compiler directive that literally like you can't send it to the server unless the server understands it. Obviously, you can't send it. Oh no, wait, sorry, that's a server side directive.
I'm just realizing I've confused two things, but it's the same concept. Like compile only would be this, but for server schemas, and then at local would be the same thing, but for query documents.
Potentially, the difference is that, and this is where I got confused for a moment. The difference is that on the server side, the directive is adding to the schema. Like literally, the schema that comes out will be bigger, right? It has to have extra things, and so the actual schema, the directive itself, needs to be able to tell you how to do that, because a server side compile only directive doesn't, you can't just remove that directive. You need to actually do its action as well. Otherwise, your schema is not valid, right? So, for example, in the case of copying out the fields onto the interface, if you don't do that, your schema is not valid. So your compiler must do that work. So there's not really much value in like having like an at server only like indication for it. I think we will, by the way, have a keyword for that, like metadata or annotation or something, to say whether or not it should like appear once we solve GraphQL spec issue number 300. But on the client side, things are a bit different, right? So for the at mock, you're saying the client's going to handle this entirely. So I'm not adding things to the query. I'm removing things, right? Any of these fields shouldn't exist in what I send to the server. And deletion is much simpler. So the deletion rules that you have for at mock, they could be generalized, right? So that they would also work for at client. Then anything that you use at client or at mock on should just be deleted, 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 deleted. If the selection set ends up empty, then you delete the field as well, which by the way, I've messaged you about because I don't think that's the right way to do it. But like that would be deleted as well. And then, it's got these same rules that still need to apply, etc. Like it still needs to be a valid document, and then you send the result. So what I'm saying is the rules that you have in the at mock directive that talk about removing things, they should be their own spec, which now at client and at mock and any other client local directives can share. It's just a general way of removing client only things from a schema document before sending it. And the main reason, so like one of the things that I really want to push for in the coming years, right? One of the things that is like the new on error handling, so like on error null. What that pushes for is for instead of you taking the SDL from the server, it pushes you to take the SDL from the client, right? So the client should be responsible for going to the server and finding out what the schema is, but then it should mix it with its own understanding of the world, including adding any like client local fields that you've added, type extensions, etc. And then its schema should be what something like GraphQL Code Generator runs against, rather than the one from the server. So that means that we can then have something like GraphQL Code Generator without knowing anything special, should be able to say, this is a client local directive. So yes, I know what type it is, and I can generate the correct types for TypeScript, and I can say, this mock field exists and it's a string. But also when I generate trusted documents, I remove it from what is going to be sent to the server, right? And those are two different tasks that GraphQL Code Generator can do both of.
That makes a ton of sense. That's like a lot of different nuts and bolts here, all kind of working together. But that I think I understood that completely. That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
In the way that the mock spec would be like the implementation of that on web would be what we talked about earlier, Gerald, generating those fields, and so it just kind of all works together. That's nice.
You'd probably also need the differentiation between field removal and just directive removal. Like obviously we have several client directives in Apollo client, not at client, but that are just the directive itself is stripped out because the server doesn't understand it. It just specifically for cache and whatnot. You would probably need something to differentiate, but same principle applies.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I've just written into chat like at local remove field true, at local remove directive true, or two different directives, whatever. But I think that's really good point because I was only thinking of it in terms of removing fields, but actually just removing the directives is quite key as well. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. That way you can build
so that could be used for. Sorry, say again.
I was going to say that way you can build behaviors into the clients. Like data masking, for example, is a good one in Apollo client where we're not Relay, so we're not 100% just data masking only. So as a migration path, we introduced at unmask directive. That is something the server will never see or care about, but that's just to know whether or not at runtime to provide certain fields or, take them out. We would use the remove directive true, at local type behavior.
There's also other things that you might want to do, like, I don't know, at test override or whatever, where you say this field, when I run it through my tests, always return this value. But when I run it in production, ask the server what to do. So in that case, you just want to remove the directive rather than the whole field. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find, I haven't submitted it as a gap yet, but we worked on the at match directive proposal as well, which sounds like it would be another good candidate for this removal too.
Yeah, cool. Go on. So I really like the idea of like taking, essentially simplifying at mock, because now it doesn't need to concern itself with the concept of what a local thing is. And the directives on directives, I think we have merged now. It's at least really close to being merged. I think it's
I think I got the
RFC3.
notification. Yeah, I think I got at least the PR on GraphQL.js. I think got merged like 2 weeks ago, so it was really recent.
Yeah, so that's
I don't
really
know if
cool.
it's been published in any form, but at least if you were to clone main and or whatever the current main branch is and run it, then I think that would you'd be able to use it in some form.
So are we going to standardize at local then?
I think I'd want to make sure that no one's using it first. So it might be that we go with a like a different name. But yeah, something of that ilk, I think would make sense. And it would literally just be a directive on a directive. So just
yeah, that makes sense.
I have one more potential. You're both the right people to speak to about this because it's both Golden Pathy and also client relies on client. But instead of removing things from operations, adding things to operations. So prior already includes __ type name, which Apollo does by default, I guess. Another one that I want to have happen is, and this is a 2-hour conversation, ID fields.
Yeah.
And having that happen by default if you know that an ID field does already exist on the schema. Because as much as you could fiddle around with
lint rules, that's what I normally use.
Yeah.
Well, you could. Yeah, lint rules is good, but if you don't have IDs everywhere, then you have to do platform specific teaching the normalized cache what this thing is and how to merge objects. But if you just encode that in an ID field, then that just becomes implicit. And so it's kind of like a loose thought here because there's like a lot of directions you could go, but like I think at the least at local require field or something. I don't know. At local, I don't know. I need to think about this a bit more.
So at least it's just, I think it highlights a need for, there's different behaviors. Obviously, remove field, remove directive, but just we need to think more broadly than just removal. There's got to be something that some kind of like alteration, like operation altering behavior.
Yeah. Then I think just like the over what's what I'm looking for here? Like overloading what an ID field does anyway is a separate discussion because you need an ID field to merge types in in an entity in Federation, and sometimes people generate just like garbage temporary IDs to do that, but it's all separate discussion. So anyway, yeah. Sorry.
So I have two thoughts on this already. So again, capabilities. One of the things that I would like to indicate with capabilities is what your, as you mentioned, there's like an ID field has like 3 purposes, but like what your cache identification key is or keys. So for most schemas today, that would be either ID if they're relay style, or it'd be like type name ID, done to type name ID. But like for some, so for example, like some people use ID as their database identifier, but they don't always have it, like if they've got like a join table. So in that case, like you can't rely on ID existing. So often you'll add another field. You won't want to call it ID because that will conflict with like what you use for your database. So you might add, say, node ID or cache ID or cache key or something to every type. So I would like for the capability system to be able to just have a standard value that says this is your identification key for your normalized cache. Like this is the one you should use. And then I would like for tooling, like for example, or even for the client, so like Apollo client shouldn't need to have its cache configured manually by the user. It should just be able to say, this is my thing. I already know what the SDL for the server is. I can like combine this together and see which types have it, and I can generate the right stuff for this. And maybe this is like dev time tooling, just to be clear, rather than runtime Apollo client behavior. But nonetheless, like it can generate that configuration for you by introspecting your schema, combining it with the rules. But this also would tie into things like lint tooling, which is also part of the golden path, in my opinion, where lint tooling can like enforce that you've specified this. Like every selection set that selects on user must select under ID and under type name, sorry, and cache key. Right, that's required by our server, so we just enforce that that's the case, and that's like also auto fixable. So like you save, it gets added, everyone's happy.
Yeah, that would be way nice.
So anyway, my main thought at the moment is that service capabilities are like really key to the golden path. Like they're really key to all of this style of point your client or your tooling at an endpoint and just have as much as possible populated for you. Which again, the whole point of the golden path is that someone's first experience of GraphQL should be amazing. And if like it just configures everything automatically and your normalized caches work and you get helpful prompts in your editor when you forget to select the right field and so on and so forth, and everything just works, that's what we want. So I want to push like service capabilities over the line. It's like my next highest priority, really. If you can think of things that we might also want service capabilities for, which is why I keep like saying we can use it for this, we can use it for that, like start thinking about other things it's useful for as well. And see if any of them require something that's more subtle than what it currently gives us, which is essentially a string key value store. Because that's all it really is. I mean, the strings are point period separated, dot separated. So you can use like you can create like a object structure from it by just like having more dots with more properties in. But
makes sense.
If there is something that needs more complexity or a different data type or something, I would love to know about it real soon. So yeah, have a think, let me know.
Do you have a link to that proposal, by the way? Just I'd like to look over
Yeah,
that
again. I'll find.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, for those following on YouTube, it is pull request number 1208. I've dropped a link in the chat.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, so I think it makes a lot of sense.
So @local or whatever we call it would teach GraphQL code generator or whatever standardized tool we come up with to produce document hashes. That would help inform that. About removals, I think the thing I was trying to say earlier is how do we teach that tool that certain clients may add __ type name? Like how do you find like the additive things, I guess?
Yeah. So I think the golden path would say to clients, use that this is what @local means, and all clients and tooling are expected to understand @local. They don't need to understand @mock or @client or any of the others, but they need to understand @local so that they can trim things out. But I think also the golden path will have a concept of identity. Does it? It might already have something to do with normalized caching. Client. No, it doesn't. So at the moment, I'm not sure how much I want to like push normalized caching. I think normalized caching is one of those features that like GraphQL really offers, and gives you this like consistent rendering. Like when you update a piece of data, having it update everywhere, I think is really, really valuable. But that said, it's not without its drawbacks, right? It does increase complexity. There's all sorts of interesting things where like if you do a new query that has a smaller selection set, then that gets merged with your existing store. So now you've got some old data and some new data mixed together when you render it next. And that can be a bit weird. For example, like imagine you changed your account currency and you pulled down the new currency identifier, but you didn't update any of your balances. And now you're saying, oh, I've got this many yen rather than this many dollars or whatever. And those numbers are very different, right? So there is definitely drawbacks, and there are people that I very much respect in the GraphQL ecosystem that are like normalized stores aren't always the best way to do it. And I actually find that it's better not to.
If you don't have IDs everywhere, which is like why I came back to this, which is why I like started with this and like why I've been thinking so much about it, it's a real problem and bites you in ways you don't expect. The way that we ran into it is by when we do server-side rendering for pages that aren't using like the React streaming suspense APIs, we still do the like 2-pass thing where we have like a pre-fetch queries phase, like before we even kick into React rendering. So we like create an Apollo client object, then we know what all of the queries are that would be executed in the React render pass, and then just like pre-fetch those queries in Apollo client, and then we execute the React rendering step. But if two queries within that initial like pre-fetch phase clobber each other, by which I mean like they don't have IDs and they're in like the same, and this repo kind of like demonstrates that issue, then like oops, now you're doing like a double React render because that second query, or sorry, that first query got wiped from the cache, and so it's no longer a cache hit, and so it just manifests as a performance issue, and people are like really confused why like cache mismatches leads to double React renders. Is like really confusing, but this is like a very, very real problem that people run into all the time. So
it's probably the number one thing I hear as a maintainer, that non-normalized data like bites people a lot, especially when you get that clobbering behavior, because you start seeing refetches in places that you don't understand.
So I'd absolutely agree that if you are using a client that uses a normalized store, then absolutely making sure that your normalized like caching is set up, your identifiers are clear and are in every request. It's vital, right?
Yeah.
But I think the other argument is just doing a fetch from like a GraphQL endpoint and just rendering that data without even putting it into a normalized store is itself a valid way of doing GraphQL. So I want to be careful how we approach that from the Golden Path, but I think it's okay to say that in general, like the Golden Path is meant to be opinionated, and I think it's okay to say our opinion is that normalized caching is the better way to go. And so anyone who's doing normalized caching needs to follow this list of rules. And one of them is like, make sure you've got this service capability that identifies what your identity fields are. Schema designers make sure that that identity field exists on every cacheable object type.
Yeah.
And this is where we then need to explain to schema designers what the difference is between like a fetchable ID and a cacheable ID, because they're not always the same thing.
This needs to be a mini site in itself, because I have tried to explain this, and my Google Doc at the company is like pages and pages long full of like examples and edge cases, and like what you do about like derived types where like the parent node has an ID, but like the set, but it's you know what I'm saying. But I agree. Like this probably, I would say that should be part of the Golden Path, because we like caching, and my vote would be normalized caching is better than non-normalized caching. And as many problems as it has, it's still better. And a large value of the golden path is that I can delete all of my internal documentation on this topic and point instead to a really, really high quality, GraphQL approved guidance on how you do types. How you define IDs for types, and then who knows, maybe you build like skills around that or whatever to make this even easier in the future. But
yes, we should.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Well, it sounds like you're both quite excited about the whole normalized caching being on the golden path. I would like to encourage you to raise some pull requests. Like, let's get it in there. Let's get all of these rules, all these things where we see people tripping over. Like, let's get those baked in. And I'd love to work with you to figure out how we can get this working also in as automated a fashion as possible. Like, we shouldn't need the end user to do anything. They should just pick up their tools and it should just work. I'm happy to work with you to see how we can fit this into service capabilities, into the HTTP spec, like writing a gap if we need to for this, that, and the other, like all the different pieces, get it all together and make it work as a whole. That would be awesome.
Give me a couple weeks off after.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. Same.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for an excellent discussion this evening. I think this has been hugely productive. And I look forward to seeing you at conference next week.
Awesome. Sounds good. We'll see you there.
See you there.
Bye. Bye.